Good evening, everyone. I'm going to pass over to Rebbitzin Emma Taylor to kick us off for this evening. L'chaim.
Hi. Am I unmuted? No. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, everyone. Hi. I haven't met most of you in person. I think my son just appeared there. I haven't met most of you in person yet, and I'm really looking forward to doing so. Please God, very soon. But it's lovely to see all your faces on these screens. And before we start, I want to say a big thank you to Louise Muntz for arranging this wonderful evening this evening, and for the wonderful cocktails. L'chaim, everyone. And to Eva for the delicious brownies, even though I didn't manage to eat one. But I heard from my husband they were very good. So thank you very much. So we're going to start off the evening with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Amelia Gersheny. Amelia grew up in Edgware and went to Leeds University, where she met her husband, Josh, and married after finals, came down to live in Bournemouth in 2015. And according to her, she loves it in Bournemouth. She has a 2-year-old lupus, also her words, not mine, called Ezra. And she's now a doctor of psychiatry in Hertfordshire. So I'm going to hand over to her to hear some words of wisdom from Amelia.
Hi, everyone. I apologise. My speech is on my computer, so I'll probably be kind of not always focusing and reading off here, if that's okay. So as Emma said, I'm Amelia. I moved to Bournemouth 5 years ago now, straight from graduating university. Did my finals, got married, and came straight to Bournemouth, where lots of our friends and family live. So we're really happy here, love living here, and I've loved getting involved with the shul and helping out in any way we can. So hello all, welcome to this wonderful event. Hopefully, despite being in our homes, we can still all eat, drink, and be very merry together. So this year, Sukkot has been very different. For some, it's been a good different, and for others, a not so good different. From scheduling meals with guests, will we have them, won't we have them, too many guests, too few guests, to shopping for food, how much, not enough food, too much food, to wondering how to sit out enough in the sukkah in the never-ending rain. It's not been a Sukkot without planning and then planning some more. But amongst all the planning, is still at the heart of it a Jewish festival with meaning, lessons to be learnt, and inspiration. But what are the meanings behind Sukkot as a whole? For everyone here, it's individual, based on their own experiences, what they've read, what they've learnt, and what they've been taught. It might be about exile, it might be about remembering that Hashem is always around us, and it might even be about interior design of a lovely sukkah and what decorations are the most waterproof. For me, personally, the beauty of Sukkot lies in the structure of the sukkah itself. It's simple. It's a structure outside with some walls and some decorations that are normally very wet, and a few chairs and tables depending on how many people come to visit. We build our sukkahs to remember the 40-year exile in the wilderness, where we as Jewish people were at one with Hashem, whilst not living our expected comfortable life, surrounded by prosperity and items that we might have been not used to. I know that many of us have heard about many stories and or divrei Torahs about living the so-called simple life, and how that can really expand our knowledge and make us more grateful. But if you truly look at our lives today, we spend so much time amassing clutter, be it clothes, toys, books, knowledge of who's dancing what song on Strictly this week, how much things on Amazon Prime Day went up. But when all of this becomes so overwhelming, what do? We might take a few days to clear out our wardrobes. We might list some toys on eBay or Facebook Marketplace, or watch some TV program to replace the troubling thoughts stimulated by a previous program. But how can we be truly free like our ancestors were? How can we truly allow ourselves to live simply in this day and age when all the time we are told to do more, explore more, learn more, connect more? For me, personally, the overlap of World Mental Health Day and Sukkot is really interesting. During Sukkot, we focus on the minimalist approach to our lives. We should sleep and eat in a wooden booth outside, exposed to the elements, covered only by bamboo or leaves, allowing ourselves to connect with the experience of our ancestors and the simple lives that they lived. We focus on shaking a twig or a few leaves and a misshapen lemon. We focus on going to shul, reading some prayers that we've read before, and we focus on nice meals with our friends. We learn to be happy with what we've got. If we've got 4 canvas walls, great. If we've got a cover that's waterproof, even better. And actually, if it doesn't rain, it's been a fantastic Sukkot. On Sukkot, along with the other Shalosh Regalim, the 3-foot festivals, we are instructed to be V'samachta b'chagecha. You shall rejoice on your festivals. We are told we must be happy despite the constant rain, and however we feel in the Sukkah, be it connected or disconnected, be it thinking, how long have I got until the next thing needs to come out of the oven, or thinking, what have I got to do after Sukkot goes out tomorrow, and despite what else is going on in our lives. Our sages put it quite succinctly. They say, who is rich? Anyone who is content with what they have. And how can we be content if we're always thinking about the more and the next? This line of thought is in direct contrast to the narrative of our current lives, where we're told to constantly do more, to buy more, that we need more, especially in order to be happy. If it isn't material goods that are being sold as fixes to happiness, then it's the constant flow of news, real or fake, that is always infiltrating our thoughts, interrupting any sort of connections that we may be trying to make with ourselves, or any sort of meaningful reflection that we're trying to see how we're really feeling. Mental Health Day seems to be grounded in the same roots, getting in touch with ourselves and our feelings, and allowing ourselves to start a conversation with others that we may not have done before without all these added distractions. As Emma said, I'm currently working as a doctor in Hertfordshire, training to be a psychiatrist, which is why Mental Health Day was so key to my thought process over Sukkot. I've spent the last 8 months working in old age psychiatry, both in the community and currently on a dementia unit. During on-calls and in my day-to-day working life, I've seen the drastic impact of overburdened lives and the ensuing reluctance to recognize the need for mental health help daily. Furthermore, the addition of COVID-19 and subsequent uncertainties has led to a massive increase in people experiencing anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and cognitive issues. By allowing ourselves to embrace simplicity and to not be distracted by the outside world, we can truly reflect on our own thoughts, our own feelings, and our own behaviors. We give ourselves space to focus on what is truly important to each of us, which allows us to confide and share with others about our own state of mind and the need for help when we need it the most. This simple life allows us to focus on ourselves and those around us at a time we are told that it's okay to not be okay. It's definitely okay to need time to think, to reflect, and to also work on ourselves. This too is a theme of the book of Kohelet, which we read on Sukkot. In it, King Solomon reflects on how the incredible wealth that he amassed never brought happiness. True and lasting contentment cannot come from physical riches. We need the spiritual tranquility that comes from the knowledge and recognition that we are living worthy lives and that we are happy with what we have. Simplicity allows us to be reflective to our inner selves, whilst also being able to recognize in ourselves and those around us when our bodies and mind are in need of a break or extra support. I invite all of you now to take time to connect with yourselves, to separate your mind and thoughts from the day-to-day fast-paced life we live, and think about how you can support yourselves and each other to live a truly happier life. It's time to have these important, deep conversations with not only ourselves, but with each other. Conversations where we ask, are we truly happy? What do I really need to help me be happy? What can I do to others to help them be happy? It is this time over Sukkot when we remove all the clutter and distractions and look simply at our lives. That's it.
Well done.
I see everyone nodding, saying thank you. It was really wonderful. And on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Judy Wolf. So Judy moved to Bournemouth in 1982 and has been very involved with the community ever since. She was involved with Gila and the Brownies and the Ladies Committee, and was even vice chairman for a few years as well. She made Aliyah 4 years ago to Netanya, as you were hearing before. We're all very jealous of your views of the sea. And she's a frequent visitor back to Bournemouth. And she's now going to be talking to us about the Chagim and the difference between the Chagim in Bournemouth and in her new life in Netanya. So over to you, Judy.
Thank you. Well, shalom, everyone. And you've just taken out my first paragraph where I was introducing myself. But I will add that I actually grew up in Edgware, and I lived in Borehamwood, as you say, for 34 years. And my involvement in the community went on unabated until I made Aliyah. Perhaps it was a bit too long for some people, but nonetheless, I felt very, very much a part of Borehamwood as it grew from a fairly small community, meeting in what was the shul in the Kolrina Hall before we had our beautiful new shul built. I always loved attending the shul services for all those years, where the community was always uplifted by the davening, the communal singing of all the traditional prayers, but most of all the kiddushim afterwards for the social aspect. For this evening, I just want to give a small insight to the Hagim in Israel and how I personally have experienced them. But I'm sure that many of you have experienced one or more Hagim of the Hagim in Israel yourselves. For the most part, the shuls I attended pre-corona varied in friendliness. The services are mainly quiet. They start earlier, mainly due to the heat, but take about as long as here, which surprised me. I thought it would be much quicker. The tunes vary from shul to shul, and of course the expat shul tunes are still the best and the most familiar. During the past months, everyone has been so innovative, and due to the garden spaces between blocks of buildings, many minyanim have been held outdoors, socially distanced, some not so, and some more melodic than others. I'm sure you know that much of Israel, although a Jewish state, is secular. And for many Israelis and immigrants, the Chagim are cultural, traditional, or even irrelevant rather than religious. And initially, I was rather taken aback to find that many take the opportunity of the statutory days off to go to beach, to have days out, barbecues, etc. Where I live in Kiryat HaSharon, but in fact in all of Netanya, there's a plethora of shuls which cater for every level, and many of the areas of mainly expats have more of a sense of community due to their English-speaking shul-going backgrounds. The main difference for me is that in the UK, as a minority, we have a need to celebrate as a community, to enjoy the sense of belonging, and to enjoy the sense of belonging and to consolidate our Judaism together. In Israel, everyone's a Jew, irrespective of their observance, and I know I belong, and my connection is even stronger. Because of the weather, we don't have to worry about rain, and festivals can be celebrated outdoors. Over Purim, the main streets in the center of Netanya and other surrounding areas are closed off. Ha'atzmaut Square is chock-a-block with families, and the fancy dresses of children and adults are absolutely amazing and so innovative. There is ongoing entertainment for everyone, and a huge adloyada. That's a literal translation is until one no longer knows, possibly linked to the imbibing of spirits on the day. And it's a joyful parade by the children and youth with floats, dancing, music, gymnasts, magicians. The custom apparently originated in Tel Aviv back in 1912, but this year everything was cancelled. Although this was my first real Pesach in Israel, I've spent 3 of the last 5 in the UK, for me it was a particularly difficult period during the lockdown, since I was anticipating family and many friends being in Israel for Chag. But instead, like thousands of others, I sat alone with my Seder plate, matzah, Haggadah, and meal for one. That said, Pesach is one of the easiest Chagim. The supermarkets, many of whose products are kosher lePesach all year round, are just like those here, except you don't have to hunt for the KLP section. The buying frenzy is no different. The same method of closing off the chametz as in the UK, plastic sheets with sellotape, which doesn't stick very well, and only one Seder night. What was so special in this annus horribilis is that at a given time, everyone came out on their balconies and Manishtana could be heard echoing around the neighborhoods. That literally set me off with tears and was just a most amazing, amazing experience. So Rosh Hashanah, again, 2 days off work, and similar to the UK, shul, lunch invitations, walk home, sleep, dinner invitations, much transportation of schissels of food, go to bed on a very full stomach, and repeat. The roads are very quiet, and this truly is family time, whether at home or traveling into city. But of course, this year, the travel limitations applied. Yom Kippur, the one day in the year where there are no cars at all. The roads are filled with families, buggies, pushchairs, scooters, and bikes. 2 years ago, I attended an extremely interesting combined Ashkenazi Sephardi service. They even had a machzor with pictures in the margin to indicate when you stand and when you can sit. There's no dress code. I did once attend a Chabad service on Yom Kippur where the children were noisily in and out with scooters and bags of crisps and sweets. I found it actually very disrespectful and very difficult to concentrate, and it was impossible to see or hear anything. But I was told, this is Israel. I find Sukkot the most interesting in terms of the frenetic preparations. In apartment blocks, Sukkot are built on balconies, which are open to the sky on at least the floor above. Where this is not possible, the race is on after Rosh Hashanah to grab the best spots in the communal gardens, usually near the lights, where the base of the sukkah is then laid out. Those who are not quick enough to be near the light trail electric wires from their apartment windows. And as it is good weather, it's actually very easy to sleep in the sukkah. This year, in a photograph sent from the gardens near my building, the Sukkot were wall to wall. They vary in size, design, and comfortability. Is that the right way to say it? In comfort. And I don't think the pop-up sukkah craze has reached us yet. Barbecues are set up for Chol HaMoed meals. Decorations are the best. And I'm sure that China sends all their surplus Christmas stock here, just in time for decorating the sukkah. One year, even an aptly named Red Rebbe model was seen in the sukkah. Yes, we all laughed at that one. Simcha Torah this year was celebrated Motzei Shabbat, as there's no second day, but unusually, not this year during lockdown. Simchat Torah was celebrated on Motzei Shabbat this year. There was no 2-day holiday, but during lockdown, we didn't have the usual blasting music from Chabad or the Nachman boys, which filled the streets, and all the children are generally outside with flags causing mayhem. For Hanukkah, the shops are filled with Chanukiot and dreidels. Many place the Chanukiah outdoors on balconies in a special glass box or in their windows. Hanukkah gelt and gifts, the same as we have here in the UK, wide-eyed children, Maltzur, echoes around the whole area. And usually Chabad or the Nachman boys again are driving around with the boom boxes on the roof of the car, belting out all the Hanukkah songs. We'll have to wait and see what happens this year. So all in all, it's much the same as it is here in the UK. But of course, with the exception of maybe a couple of days of Hanukkah, the weather is just so much better. I belatedly wish you and your families Shana Tova, good health, and a better time to come. Stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. I know you've whet all of our appetites to go back to the Holy Land when we are able to, when this whole thing is over. It sounds wonderful. And your personal stories and anecdotes were really, really lovely. So thank you so much for sharing that all with us.
My pleasure.
And on to our last speaker. Our last speaker is Joe Grose, who moved to Bournemouth in 2004 and has since then been actively involved in the shul. First of all, as a volunteer for the care committee, and then helping really to start the BES at Yavne from its inception, and also helping to found the Women's Megillah reading, which apparently is in its 10th year, which is very, very exciting. Joe professionally works in the United Synagogue, and putting her skills to good use, trying to make positive changes for our community. And I know she's been working very hard with everything going on with COVID. So on behalf of everyone, we thank you for all that you're doing for the wider Anglo Jewry. And now over to you, Jo.
Thank you. Yes, so I've lived in Boreham Wood for 16 years. I came here when I was pregnant with my oldest son. I can't really believe that, but yeah, we absolutely love this community. I can normally be found in Yavna, but we have a real soft spot for this community. So I'm going to talk about Simchat Torah. So I'm going to ask you what the one image is that comes to mind when you think about the Simchat Torah celebrations of your childhood. And I'll just give you a minute to think about it. Not a minute, a second. So I imagine that some of you might be thinking of the sweets, or as a child gazing up at the gleaming Sifrei Torah, or maybe it was about being crammed together under the talit when you were a kid, maybe a bit like kind of slightly sweaty moment with all the other children in the community. Mine is very specific, and I don't think is shared by that many people. It's a cord, quite a thick cord. And to explain, I grew up in a beautiful and very traditional Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in Manchester. It was magnificent architecturally, proud of its heritage, rich in Sephardi tunes, which I miss very much still, and keen on order. So Simchat Torah was a peak of the year, and I do remember how magical it felt to walk back home in the dark along the tree-lined roads with my dad and my grandpa and a big bag of chocolates. But my primary recollection, and I think my dad's on this call actually, so I've just realized he's gonna think this is all a bit odd, but my primary recollection is of a cord that was pulled in front of the procession of children in between each hakafah. So it kind of held us back behind the bimah. And the aim was to restore calm and to keep the children out of the way as the Sifrei Torah changed hands. And I can remember being at the front of this held back procession, looking at the cord and willing it to be lifted so that we could join the next circuit. So Simchat Torah, whilst happy as a child for me, meant a kind of managed, restrained kind of joy. And then in my mid-teens, I had a Simchat Torah awakening. I stayed with a friend in Prestwich, which is on the other side of Manchester, for Simchat Torah, and we went to the BA Bayit in the evening, and the room was filled with dancing and whooping and jumping and singing teenagers. And I have to be honest that probably on our side in the Mechitza, we didn't even see a Sefer Torah, but it didn't matter to me at the time. The experience was so overwhelming, so enthralling, and I can recall being pulled around the circle, and I can remember the sound of everyone singing and songs that I didn't really know the words to, and it was celebrating the Torah and Jewishness with such kind of boldness, and it was really wonderful to know that I wasn't on the sidelines or I wasn't in the gallery. I was all behind a cord, but I was right in the center of everything, and it was joyous, and I knew then I have found the real Simchat Torah experience. So that was probably about 30 years ago. And actually, truth be told, I never went back to that BA Bayit again. However, I think it'd be fair to say that I've been trying to recreate that physicality and that feeling of intense simcha, of really letting my hair down every year since. And so some of you might have seen me jumping my way around a circle and everyone is kind of plodding and I'm jumping around on Simchat Torah, and thought that I looked a bit over keen. And I think it's because deep down, I'm trying to find my way back to that first real Simchat Torah experience. So now we're in 2020, and my job is communities director at the United Synagogue. And the last few months, as Emma said, have been wholly centered on taking our communities out of lockdown, from reopening our shuls. So from May, I worked with an exceptional group of people, rabbis and trustees and medics and lay leaders and colleagues, to plan a pathway to reopening our buildings for services and then for everything else that we do. And right at the beginning, we discussed all the scenarios that we needed to, how we're going to enter the building, how we're going to social distance, how someone's going to open the ark, how we're going to do Galila. And we turned it all into detailed guidance, which was shared with US communities and beyond. And right at the beginning of that process in May and June, we agreed that we needed to plan for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because in an ordinary year, communities would have already finished their planning in July for the Yomim Noraim. So when that first version of the guidance came out, we'd already done thinking around things like the shorter Rosh Hashanah services and that online Kol Nidre concept. We'd done that. But there was one issue about which I had my head firmly stuck in the sand, and that was Simchat Torah. Yes, that day of unbridled joy, the day when we're supposed to freely express our love for the Torah through song and dance, the day we let our hair down. How on earth were we going to do this in a controlled, socially distanced manner? Impossible. And actually, in truth, my feelings were shared by many on the group, and Chatham House rules and all of that, but definitely someone suggested that we just cancel it this year. Would that be possible, just not to do it? But then politely, Diane Binstock, who sat on our group, Diane of the London Beth Din and senior rabbi of St John's Wood Shul, stepped in and put us in our places and calmly pointed out that this year, in our communities, we can do Simchat Torah as it's meant to be done. And we'll do 7 circuits, we'll do the Hakafot, the Sefer Torah will take center stage, they can take center stage, there can be Chatanim, we can lay in the final Pesukim of V'zot HaBracha and the first Pesukim of Bereshit, and in that way we'll have celebrated Simchat Torah. And I don't mind telling you that I found that a bit challenging. I probably bit my tongue, because I told myself that the real Simchat Torah was this joyous thing with dancing, and I dismissed that orderly nature of Simchat Torah from my childhood, and the one where the chords was penning people back. And here was a Diane suggesting otherwise. So what was the answer? So I decided to find out a bit about what the real Simchat Torah was about. So normally we ask a question, we go straight to the text, but it's a bit problematic in this case, because as you probably know, there's no mention of the festival of Simchat Torah in the Tanakh. In fact, the only references are to Shmini Atzeret, and similarly, Shmini Atzeret is mentioned in the Talmud, where it's set apart from Sukkot, but no mention of Simchat Torah. Sorry, my phone keeps ringing. I'm sorry, I'm just going to try and make it go away. Okay, however, we do know from the Mishnah that there was and is actually still a tradition of making a celebration of Siyum on completing the study of a tractate of the Talmud. And it was usually marked by a meal of celebration. And so it's been understood that this custom evolved so that every year when we finish reading the Sefer Torah, and then of course beginning it again, we would have a celebration. And the celebration signified the honor that we give to the Torah, and also the fact that we never pause in our reading of it. We never abandoned it, even when the temple was destroyed. So it sounds like it was kind of a modest celebration. And then there's a scholarly view that the celebrations begin to get a bit more exuberant in the 13th and 14th centuries, a period during which successive generations of Jews faced blood libels and the Crusades. And so when Simchat Torah came around each year, they danced and clung to the Torah. They were keen to show their devotion to it in those very turbulent and difficult times. And then it's first referred to by commentators in the 15th century, and there's a reference to a feast, not drink, but food. And then it's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, which is compiled in the 16th century. And that goes something like this. It explains that the last day of Sukkot is referred to as Simchat Torah, because we rejoice and we make a celebratory feast on that day to celebrate the completion of the Torah. It says we also have the custom to remove all the Torah scrolls in the ark and to sing songs and praises. And we also have the custom to encircle the bimah with the scrolls. And all of these are out of joy, and we call up people, and we call up to the Torah, and we call up the children. So for the first time in text, here we have something that sounds a bit more recognizable. Hakafot, aliyot, children being called up. But to be honest, it sounds a bit like the orderly Simchat Torah of my childhood, like structured joy. And then, yes, we have that description from Samuel Pepys, which I'm sure many of you know, which was written, and here's my fun fact, on, to be very specific, Wednesday the 14th of September, oh, get it right, Wednesday the 14th of October, 1663. So that is actually 357 years ago to this day. Samuel Pepys wrote this diary extract where he describes visiting the synagogue in London, where he observed a Simchat Torah service. And he describes the women behind the mechitza and the men wearing and kissing their taletim, and the congregation reciting the prayer for the royal family. And then we get this famous quote. So this is me as Samuel Pepys. But Lord, to see the disorder, laughing, sporting, and no attention, but confusion in all their service, more like brutes than people knowing the true God, would make a man forswear ever seeing them more. And indeed, I did see so much, or could have imagined there had been any religion in the whole world so absurdly performed as this. So brutish, absurd. So it seems that by 1663, the Simchat Torah experience was beginning to resemble the chaos, rowdiness, and commotion that we see in some of our shuls today. So what did I learn from this little journey through history? I've learned that Simchat Torah comes in many forms, from the feast to the solemn circuits to the mayhem. And that unlike every other moment in Jewish life, and I'm willing to be corrected afterwards in case I've missed it, but it seems that there's very little halacha associated with it, right? There's no rule about which way the circle should go or how long you should dance for, or specifically there's a suggestion of the order of the songs, but it doesn't matter if you do it differently, or the length of time a child can wave a flag, or even how much archers you drink. And when I wrote that, I remembered that I have only spent one very drunken Simchat Torah in Croxdale Road, and that was when someone kindly left out a bottle of cherry brandy, and it all went a bit of a haze. So that's I've only done one very drunken Simchat Torah in this community. Anyway, forget that. The point is that so much of what we do on Simchat Torah is minhag, custom, which means that we have the license to experience the type of Simchat Torah that works for us. So if you're like me, then a good Simchat Torah means being lurched around a circle, jumping and singing. It means inclusive mayhem, physicality, joy, and dancing with the Torah scroll. However, the quicker, more focused, calmer hakafot this year worked for many people. Quite a few people have commented to me from various communities that they didn't miss the forced jollity or that slight discomfort they had about singing and dancing for hours. And there was no distraction of the kiddush and the chat and the noise. The focus was on the Torah. And actually, I heard just this morning that a child with special needs who normally dreads Simchat Torah because of the crowds and the noise, this year was able to take part in the hakafot for the first time. So here's my conclusion. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but having looked back, I realized that I was wrong about finding the real Simchat Torah experience. There is no authentic Simchat Torah. It doesn't need to be one particular way. For this Chag especially, we have the room to make it what we want it to be. So our responsibility is simply to ensure that there's simcha, that there's joy, because goodness knows we could do with a good dose of that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As a history teacher, I absolutely loved all the historical anecdotes, especially about Samuel Pepys. It's amazing. It's today. It's unbelievable. You couldn't have made that up. It's really incredible. And I really look forward to the shul being back to the chaos that it once was. And I look forward myself to seeing it because I've heard so much about the wonderful Boronwood shul with all the crazy dancing, etc. And I wasn't able to see it this year. So I'm looking forward to being able to see it, please God, very soon. Before we conclude the evening, I just want to have a few words just to share with you all a little bit about this week's parsha we're going to be reading. So this week we are starting the book of Bereshit. We're starting with the parsha of Bereshit, the beginning of the whole Torah. And we see and we read and we learn about how the world was created. And we're told that the world was made through speech. God made 10 utterances, we're told. And through those 10 utterances, the world came into existence. So the question is, why did God choose to create the world in this way? Why did he just not choose one utterance or no utterances, just click his fingers and just make it happen? What was this repetition, the multiple communications that God made? What does that teach us? And I think one of the reasons is that the repetition and the constant communication shows us the significance of speech. God could have chosen to speak only once and bring the world into existence in this way. But by doing the opposite, by doing 10 times his utterances, God emphasizes how important and unique the gift of speech really is. There are more commandments in the Torah with regard to speech than any other mitzvah. There are 17 negative and 14 positive, which is more than any other. Now, we are told in Jewish tradition that we are meant to be emulating God, acting like him in any way that we can. But when it comes to creation, this is not really possible. Because when Hashem created the world, he did so, it's called yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. There was nothing in the world before God spoke these special utterances and formed the world as we know it. When we create something, when we bake a cake or build something, or whatever it is, we are using material that already exists to help us with a finished product. It's not yesh ma'ayin, it's not something from nothing, it's something from something. There was something there beginning. So how can we emulate God in this way? And the reason or the answer is the only way we can emulate God is through speech. with our words, we have the opportunity to build or to destroy, to develop or to ruin relationships, to literally build worlds, to build people up with our words, or conversely, to totally destroy worlds and with our words as well. We see in the Torah through so many stories, I'm going to go into all now, that words are seen as more powerful than anything else. There's a phrase I remember from school, always being told, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me, which is absolute rubbish. It's not true at all. Words are the most powerful tool that we have. And I think during lockdown, especially what Joe was talking about, Simcha Torah coming together, etc. During lockdown, we were unable, and we still are really unable to come together as a mass community. Yet this evening, we came together on this virtual platform through our words. We came together as a virtual community through our wonderful speakers. We came together and we built literally worlds through our words. We created something so positive. And I really want to say a big thank you again to Louise and to Representative Eva and to all our speakers for sharing all their special words with us. And on that note, I have to say, l'chaim, and may we all be blessed to use our words that we've been blessed with only for the good and to build up other people and to enhance this wonderful community that really I'm so blessed to be part of now. So l'chaim, everybody, and have a wonderful week and a belated Chag Sameach to all of you, and hope to see you all in person very, very soon. L'chaim.